Chapter 4, hit play. Are we going? Okay. So the last thing that happened was
The dude hit him.
yeah. Somebody broke into Keno's brush hut and went to the spot where Keno had dug in the ground and hidden the pearl, and it woke Keno and Juana up, and Keno, tried to stop the guy and got bopped in the head, and the guy rushed out. But the guy did not get the pearl because if you remember,
He moved under his bed.
he moved it under his sleeping pad. That's exactly right. So he was actually sleeping on top of it. Now, we don't know for certain, but we can figure out that it was the doctor's servant who did that. Okay? All right, so we're actually starting. Oh, one more thing. I'm sorry. What did Juana tell Keno? Man, we got to do this with the pearl.
Get rid of it.
Trash.
Get rid of it. And we talked yesterday about how it has brought no good fortune, only bad fortune. Coyotito got violently ill. Their house got broken into. Keno got knocked in the head.
He's turning evil.
Yeah, he's becoming evil. It talks about this hard shell forming around him. All right, so here we are, chapter 4. I'm sorry? Yes, yeah. Keno's kind of like he's kind of hypnotized by this pearl. It is wonderful the way a little town keeps track of itself and of all its units. If every single man and woman, child and baby, acts and conducts itself in a known pattern and breaks no walls and differs with no one and experiments in no way and is not sick and is not in danger of the ease and peace of mind or steady unbroken flow of the town, then that unit can disappear and never be heard of. But let one man step out of the regular thought or the known and trusted pattern, and the nerves of the town people ring with nervousness, and communication travels over the nerve lines of the town. Then every unit communicates to the whole. We need to look at that line. Let one man step out of the regular thought or the known and trusted pattern, and the nerves of the town people ring with nervousness. Let's stop there. Guys, that's something you're going to have to get used to in life. That anytime someone brings up a new idea or a new way of doing something, it's going to make people nervous, and a lot of times it's going to make people defensive. Even if that one person may have a really good idea, we've always done it the other way. Okay, well, we're typing answers now. We're not writing them or scraping them on the side of a wall in a cave, right? But there was a time where people did that. So point is, anytime there's a major change, it upsets people, particularly in the beginning of the change. Thus, in La Paz, it was known in the early morning through the whole town that Keno was going to sell the pearl that day. We need to stop here. What's the name of the town?
La Paz.
La Paz. La Paz. Tell them what La Paz means. It means peace. La Paz means peace, like no fighting. Everybody love each other. There is something terribly ironic about the name of this town.
There's no peace in the town.
Boom. It is not at all peaceful. There's no peace. Good, y'all. Fluidity. It was known among the neighbors in the brush huts, among the pearl fishermen. It was known among the Chinese grocery store owners. It was known in the church, for the altar boys whispered about it. Word of it crept in among the nuns. The beggars in front of the church spoke of it, for they would be there to take the tithe of the first fruits of the luck. The little boys knew about it with excitement, but most of all, the pearl buyers knew about it. And when the day had come in the offices of the pearl buyers, each man sat alone with his little black velvet tray, and each man rolled the pearls about with his fingertips and considered his part in the picture. It was supposed that the pearl buyers were individuals acting alone. Now, it's about to explain how the pearl buyers work. I've actually already told you this, but it's going to reiterate it, okay? It was supposed that the pearl buyers were individuals acting alone, bidding against one another for the pearls the fishermen brought in. And once it had been so, but this was a wasteful method. For often, in the excitement of bidding for a fine pearl, too great a price had been paid to the fishermen. This was extravagant and not to be countenanced. Now, there was only one pearl buyer with many hands. Many hands means many offices, basically. Businesses, yes. And the men who sat in their offices, and waited for Keno knew what price they would offer, how high they would bid, and what method each one would use. And although these men would not profit beyond their salaries, there was excitement among the pearl buyers. There was excitement in the hunt. And if it be a man's function to break down a price, then he must take joy and satisfaction in breaking it down as far as possible. For every man in the world functions to the best of his ability, and no one does less than his best, no matter what he may think about it, quite apart from any reward they might get, from any word or praise, from any promotion. A pearl buyer was a pearl buyer, and the best and happiest pearl buyer was he who bought for the lowest prices. The sun was hot yellow that morning, and it drew the moisture from the estuary and from the Gulf and hung it in shimmering scars in the air so that the air vibrated and vision was insubstantial. A vision hung in the air to the north of the city, the vision of the mountain that was over 200 miles away. And the high slopes of this mountain were swaddled with pines, and a great stone peak rose above the timberline. And the morning of this day, the canoes lay lined up on the beach. The fishermen did not go out to dive for pearls, for there would be too much happening, too many things to see when Kino went to sell the great pearl. So are the fishermen and the pearl divers going to work that day? No. They're curious. Everybody is curious. They are not even working that day. It's like a holiday in a way. Everybody's going to go see how much money Kino gets from this pearl. I'll tell you what it's like. The Super Bowl. Super Bowl, man. Everybody sits in their living room, even people that don't watch football, and they watch that game. They want to see the halftime show, and they want to see who wins that game. Okay? Even though they don't benefit from it, they're just curious. These people don't benefit from this pearl, but they're curious. In the brush houses by the shore, Kino's neighbors sat long over their breakfast, and they spoke of what they would do if they had found the great pearl. And one man said he would give it as a, get this, one man said he would give it as a present to the Holy Father in Rome. Stop there. Do you really think that if one of these guys found it, he'd give it to the Pope? Absolutely not. Another said he would buy masses for the souls of his family for 1,000 years. That means donate the money to the church so that his family can go to heaven. You believe that? Of course not. Another thought he might take the money and distribute among the poor of La Paz. Oh yeah, he's going to give it to the poor. Sure. And a fourth thought of all the good things one could do with the money from the pearl. Charities, benefits, all of the rescues one could perform if he had money. All of the neighbors had hoped that sudden wealth would not turn Kino's head, would not make a rich man of him, would not graft onto him the evil limbs of greed and hatred and coldness. For Kino was a well-liked man. It would be a shame if the pearl destroyed him. That good wife Juana, they said, and the beautiful baby, Coyotito, and the others to come. What a pity it would be if the pearl should destroy them all. For Kino and Juana, this was the morning of mornings, comparable only to the day when the baby had been born. This was to be the day from which all other days would take their arrangement. Thus they would say, it was 2 years before we sold the pearl, or it was 6 weeks after we sold the pearl. Juana, considering the matter, threw caution to the winds, and she dressed Coyotito in the clothes she had prepared for his baptism, when there would be money for his baptism. Juana combed and braided her hair, tied the ends of it with 2 little bows of red ribbon. She put on her marriage skirt and waist. The sun was quarter high when they were ready. Kino's ragged white clothes were clean at last, and this was the last day of his raggedness. For tomorrow, or even this afternoon, he would have new clothes. The neighbors, watching Kino's door through the crevices in their brush houses, were dressed and ready too. There was no self-consciousness about their joining Kino and wanting to go pearl selling. It was expected. It was a historic moment. They would be crazy if they didn't go. It would be almost a sign of unfriendship. Juana put on her head shawl carefully, and she draped one long end under her right elbow and gathered it with her right hand so that a hammock hung under her arm. And in this little hammock, she placed Coyotito, propped up against the head shawl so that he could see everything and perhaps remember. Kino put on his large straw hat and felt it with his hand to see that it was properly placed, not on the back or side of his head like a rash, unmarried, irresponsible man, and not flat as an elder would wear it, but tilted a little forward to show aggressiveness, seriousness, and vigor. There's a great deal to be seen in the tilt of a hat on a man. Kino slipped his feet into his sandals, pulled the thongs up over his heels. The great pearl was wrapped in an old soft piece of deer skin, placed in a little leather bag. The leather bag was kept in a pocket in Kino's shirt. He folded his blanket carefully, draped it in a narrow strip over his left shoulder, and they were ready. Why is Kino wrapping this in deer skin and putting it in a leather bag and then
He wants it to be in the best shape.
That's right. Wants to make sure it doesn't get scratched or anything. That's right. Kino stepped with dignity out of the house. Get this. Watch the neighbors. I love this part. Kino stepped with dignity out of the house. Juana followed him, carrying Coyotito. And as they marched up the freshet-washed alley toward the town, the neighbors joined them. The houses belched people. The doorways spewed out children. But because of the seriousness of the occasion, Only one man walked with Kino, and that was his brother, Juan Tomas. Juan Tomas cautioned his brother. You must be careful to see they do not cheat you, he said. Very careful, Kino agreed. We do not know what prices are paid in other places, said Juan Tomas. How can we know what is a fair price if we do not know what the pearl buyer gets for the pearl in another place? That is true, said Kino, but how can we know? We are here, we are not there. As they walked up toward the city, the crowd grew behind them, and Juan Tomas, in pure nervousness, went on speaking. Before you were born, Kino, he said, the old ones thought of a way to get more money for their pearls. They thought it would be better if they had an agent who took all the pearls to the capital and sold them there and kept only his share of the profit. Kino nodded his head. I know, he said. It was a good thought. And so they got such a man, said Juan Tomas. And they pulled their pearls, and they started him off. And he was never heard of again, and the pearls were lost. Then they got another man. They started him off. He was never heard of again. And so they gave up the whole thing and went back to the old way. What do you think this guy that they were sending off to sell the pearls for all the money, what was he doing?
He was keeping them to himself.
Keeping it to himself, 100%. I know, said Kino. I have heard our father tell of it. It was a good idea, but it was against religion. And the father made that very clear. Is it really against religion to make money?
No.
The things that this church has taught them, just greed and lies and being taken advantage of. And just, by the way, if Kino could read, he would know this nonsense was not in the Bible. He's being lied to. The loss of the pearl was a punishment visited on those who tried to leave their station. And the father made it clear that each man and woman is like a soldier sent by God to guard some part of the castle of the universe. And some are in the ramparts and some far deep in the darkness of the walls. But each one must remain faithful to his post and must not go running about. Else the castle is in danger from the assaults of hell. I have heard him make that sermon, said Juan Tomas. He makes it every year. The brothers, as they walked along, squinted their eyes a little, as they and their grandfathers and great-grandfathers had done for 400 years. Since first the strangers came with argument and authority and gunpowder to back up both. And in the 400 years, Kino's people had learned only one defense, a slight slitting of the eyes and a slight tightening of the lips and the retirement. Nothing could break down this wall, and they could remain whole within the wall. The gathering procession was solemn, for they sensed the importance of this day. Any children who showed a tendency to scuffle, to scream, to cry out, to steal hats and rumple hair, were hissed into silence by their elders. So important was this day that an old man came to see riding on the stalwart shoulders of his nephew. The procession left the brush huts and entered the stone and plaster city, where the streets were a little wider and there were narrow pavements beside the buildings. And as before, the beggars joined them as they passed the church. The grocers looked out at them as they went by. The little saloons lost their customers, and the owners closed up shop and went along, and the sun beat down in the streets of the city, and even tiny stones threw shadows on the ground. These shadows, says even the stones are throwing shadows. What is Kino walking amongst? Darkness? Evil. The news of the approach of the procession ran ahead of it, and in their little dark offices,
Evil.
in their little dark offices, the pearl buyers stiffened. They learned. They got out paper so that they could be at work when Kino appeared, and they put their pearls in the desks, for it is not good to let an inferior pearl be seen beside a beauty. So these jewelers, these pearl buyers, put their pearls in their desks. They said because it's not good to let an inferior pearl be seen beside a beauty. Can somebody explain that to me?
Their pearls are bad, and his is good.
Their pearls really aren't bad, but compared to his, they are. Guys, one day when you ask a young lady to marry you, okay, if your friend has bought his fiance or wife a big old rock, you better buy one at least that size, because your fiance or wife is going to compare it to that one, and she doesn't want to look bad. You follow what I'm saying? That's kind of what happened. So it might be a great diamond, but compared to something like this, it'll look like a pebble. All right, let's keep going. Girls, am I right about that, by the way? Try and hook y'all up with a nice rock here. All right. Word of the loveliness of Kino's pearl had come to them. The pearl buyers' offices were clustered together in one narrow street, and they were barred at the windows, and wooden slats cut out so that only a soft gloom entered the offices. A stout, slow man sat in an office waiting, his face fatherly and benign. Benign means welcoming. His eyes twinkled with friendship. He was a caller of good mornings, a ceremonious shaker of hands, a jolly man who knew all jokes and yet who hovered close to sadness. For in the midst of a laugh, he could remember the death of your aunt, and his eyes could become wet with sorrow for your loss. This morning he had placed a flower in a vase on his desk, a single scarlet hibiscus, and the vase sat beside the black velvet-lined pearl tray in front of him. He was shaved close to the blue roots of his beard, and his hands were clean, nails polished. His door stood open to the morning, and he hummed under his breath while his right hand practiced legerdemain. Legerdemain is flipping a quarter or a coin among your knuckles. I'm sure you've seen people flip a pencil among their knuckles. Mm-hmm. This is doing it with a coin. He rolled a coin back and forth over his knuckles and made it appear and disappear, made it spin and sparkle. The coin winked into sight. And this coin is important, by the way. The coin winked into sight and as quickly slipped out of sight. And the man did not even watch his own performance. The fingers did it all mechanically, precisely, while the man hummed to himself and peered out the door. Then he heard the tramp of feet of the approaching crowd. And the fingers of his right hand worked faster and faster until, as the figure of Kino filled the doorway, the coin flashed, disappeared. "Good morning, my friend," the stout man said. "What can I do for you?" Kino stared into the dimness of the little office, for his eyes were squeezed from the outside glare, but the buyer's eyes had become as steady and cruel and unwinking as a hawk's eyes, while the rest of his face smiled in greeting, and secretly, behind his desk, his right hand practiced with the coin. "I have a pearl," said Kino, and Juan Tomas stood beside him, snorted a little at the understatement. The neighbors peered around the doorway, and a line of little boys clambered on the window bars and looked through. Several little boys on their hands and knees watched the scene around Kino's legs. "You have a pearl," the dealer said. "Sometimes a man brings in a dozen. Well, let us see your pearl. We will value it, give you the best price." And his fingers worked furiously with the coin. So I want you to understand, he's still sitting there doing this coin between his knuckles, not even looking, just behind his desk. He's doing this coin. And get this. Now, Kino instinctively knew his own dramatic effects. Slowly, he brought out the leather bag. Slowly, took from it the soft and dirty piece of deerskin. And then he let the great pearl roll onto the black velvet tray, and instantly his eyes went to the buyer's face. But there was no sign, no movement. The face did not change. But the secret hand behind the desk missed in its precision. The coin stumbled over a knuckle and slipped silently into the dealer's lap, and the fingers behind the desk curled into a fist. Question. The fact that this guy dropped his coin when he looked at Kino's pearl, what does that let us know about Kino's pearl?
That it's like
Big. It's like, whoa.
It's big, amazing, whoa, wow, all the other stuff. When the right hand came out of hiding, the forefinger touched the great pearl, rolled it on the black velvet. Thumb and forefinger picked it up, brought it to the dealer's eyes, twirled it in the air. Kino held his breath, and the neighbors held their breath, and the whispering went back through the crowd. "He is inspecting it. No price has been mentioned yet. They have not come to a price." Now the dealer's hand had become a personality. The hand tossed the great pearl back in the tray, forefinger poked and insulted it. And on the dealer's face there came a sad and contemptuous smile. "Sorry, my friend," he said, and his shoulders rose a little to indicate the misfortune was no fault of his. "It is a pearl of great value," Kino said. The dealer's fingers spurned the pearl so that it bounced and rebounded softly from the sound of the velvet tray. "You have heard of fool's gold," the dealer said. "This pearl is like fool's gold. Too large. Who would buy it? There is no market for such things. It is a curiosity only. I am sorry. You thought it was a thing of value, and it is only a curiosity." He's saying, this pearl is so big that it's actually worth nothing. Like, it's too big. You know?
he's trying to trick you.
That's exactly right. Now, Kino's face was perplexed. Perplexed means like confused. Kino's face was perplexed and worried. "It is the pearl of the world," he cried. "No one has ever seen such a pearl." "On the contrary," said the dealer, "it is large and clumsy. As a curiosity, it has interest. Some museum might perhaps take it in a collection of seashells. I can give you, say, 1,000 pesos. Kino's face grew dark and dangerous. Stop there. What is Kino's emotion right there?
Anger.
He's mad. He's angry. He's like that. You know what I'm saying? It is worth 50,000, he said. You know it. You want to cheat me. The dealer heard a little grumble go through the crowd as they heard this price. The dealer felt a little tremble of fear. Do not blame me, he said quickly. I am only an appraiser. Ask the others. Go to their offices. Show your pearl. Or better, let them come here so that you can see there is no collusion. Boy, he called. And when his servant looked through the rear door, boy, go to such a one and such another one and such a third one. Ask them to step in here and do not tell them why. Just say, I will be pleased to see them. And his right hand went behind the desk, and he pulled another coin from his pocket, and the coin rolled back and forth over the knuckles. So Kino, the guy offers him 1,000, and Kino's like, dude, this is 50,000. Get out of here, you cheat. He says, I'll just go somewhere else. And the dude says, hold on, man. He says, I'll get my servant to go get 2 other pearl buyers. We'll bring them in here. We'll see what they offer you. Let's see what happens. Kino's neighbors whispered together. They had been afraid of something like this. The pearl was large, but it had a strange color. They had been suspicious of it from the first. Is that true? Had they been absolutely not. These neighbors just lied to themselves. After all, 1,000 pesos was not to be thrown away. It was comparative wealth to a man who was not wealthy. And suppose Kino took 1,000 pesos. Only yesterday he had nothing. But Kino had grown tight, hard. He felt the creeping of fate, the circling of wolves, the hover of vultures. He felt the evil coagulating about him, and he was helpless to protect himself. He heard in his ears the evil music, and on the black velvet the great pearl glistened, so that the dealer could not keep his eyes from it. The crowd in the doorway wavered and broke and let the 3 pearl buyers through. The crowd was silent now, fearing to miss a word, to fail to see a gesture or an expression. Kino was silent, watchful. He felt a little tugging at his back, and he turned and looked in Juana's eyes, and when he looked away, he had renewed strength. The dealers did not glance at one another nor at the pearl. The man behind his desk says, I have put a value on this pearl. The owner here does not think it fair. I will ask you to examine this thing and make an offer. Notice, he said to Kino, I have not mentioned what I have offered. The first dealer, dry, stringy, seemed now to see the pearl for the first time. He took it up, rolled it quickly between thumb and forefinger, and cast it contemptuously back into the tray. Do not include me in the discussion, he said. I will make no offer at all. I do not want it. This is not a pearl. It is a monstrosity. His thin lips curled. So he's saying, like, this is the ugliest rock I've ever seen. I'm not giving you a penny. Now the second dealer, a little man with a shy, soft voice, took up the pearl. He examined it carefully. He took a glass from his pocket. He inspected it under magnification. Then he laughed softly. Better pearls are made of paste, he said. I know these things. This is soft, chalky. It will lose its color and die in a few months. Look! He offered the glass to Kino, showed him how to use it. And Kino, who had never seen a pearl surface magnified, was shocked at the strange-looking surface. The third dealer took the pearl from Kino's hands. One of my clients likes such things, he said. I will offer 500 pesos. Perhaps I can sell it to my client for 600. So what's the most Kino got offered, by the way?
1,000.
1,000. Kino reached quickly and snatched the pearl from his hand. He wrapped it in the deerskin and thrust it inside his shirt. The man behind the desk said, I'm a fool, I know, but my first offer stands. I still offer 1,000. What are you doing? He asked, as Kino thrust the pearl out of sight. I am cheated! Kino cried fiercely. My pearl is not for sale here. I will go, perhaps even to the capital. Now the dealers glanced quickly at one another. They knew they had played too hard. They knew they would be disciplined for their failure, and the man at the desk said quickly, I might go to 1,500. But Kino was pushing his way through the crowd. The hum of talk came to him dimly. His blood raged and pounded in his ears, and he burst through and strode away. Juana followed, trotting after him. When the evening came, the neighbors in the brush houses sat eating their corn cakes and beans. They discussed the great theme of the morning. They did not know. It seemed a fine pearl to them, but they had never seen such a pearl before. Surely the dealers knew more about the value of pearls than they. And mark this, they said, those dealers did not discuss these things. Each of the 3 knew the pearl was valueless. So, did the dealers fool all of the neighbors? Absolutely. Did they fool Keno?
No.
Then get this. One of them says, but suppose they had arranged it before. If that is so, then all of us have been cheated all of our lives. And that's where we're stopping.